In our last presentation, we experimented with either raising or lowering notes of the C major scale. After altering selected tones by a chromatic semitone through the addition of an accidental, we observed a change in emotional effect, especially after we applied the alteration to a familiar theme, Mozart's variations on vous, dirai-je, Maman, or Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Though the numerical name of the altered note remains the same, the altered sixth is still called a sixth of some sort, this phenomenon demonstrates that we need a more precise nomenclature for intervals. Here are the diatonic intervals of the major scale as measured up from its root, or fundamental tone. Prime, or unison, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and octave. Before going on to the next slide, hit the pause button and play through these intervals on your piano keyboard, 8 intervals. It is important that you get experience at this. It's easy because we show the staff notation of the intervals and a keyboard diagram indicating exactly which keys to play, going up the scale, while repeating the bottom C tone. Here is a sixth, C to A, with a choice of 3 possible bottom notes. C natural, C sharp, or C flat. Or top notes, A natural, A flat, or A sharp. Listen. Each of these intervals sounds different, yet they are all called sixths. In C major, only one of these sixths is diatonic. The other 4 have accidentals, which flag them as chromatic sixth. But what do we call each of these? Clearly, we need a more precise system to classify these intervals, and that's what we attempt to explain in this video. An earlier presentation made a distinction between perfect intervals and major intervals. The perfects measured up from the root of the scale are the prime, fourth, fifth, and octave. We'll skip the compound intervals for now.
Prior to pursuing this presentation any further, please pause and practice playing the perfect intervals up from the prime pitch on your piano.
Raising the upper tone of a perfect interval by a large or chromatic semitone creates an augmented interval. Observe that the numerical names do not change, though the augmented prime, augmented fourth, augmented fifth, and augmented octave all sound quite different. These are chromatic intervals, and the word chromatic means colorful. Now hit the pause button and practice playing the diatonic perfect intervals again, followed by these augmented intervals, side by side, so you can compare the difference in sound between the diatonic and chromatic intervals that share the same numerical name. The major intervals are the second, third, sixth, and seventh of the major scale as measured up from its prime or tonic. As before, we'll skip the compound intervals because they are essentially the same. Next, hit the pause button and practice playing through these major intervals on your piano keyboard. Raising the upper tone of the major intervals by a chromatic semitone creates a second set of augmented intervals. An augmented second, augmented sixth, and augmented ninth are shown. So now, hit the pause button again so you can practice playing this second group of augmented intervals on your piano keyboard. Compare their sound by also playing the major intervals from which they are derived. Major second, major sixth, augmented sixth, and so on, back and forth. Lowering the upper tone of a major interval by a chromatic semitone creates a minor interval. Minor meaning smaller. So here are shown the minor second, minor third, minor sixth, minor seventh, and minor ninth. Be sure to hit the pause button after each example so you can practice playing all these intervals on your piano keyboard. This may seem like just a minor thing, But trust me, you need to get used to consciously hearing the differences between all these intervals and associating the sound and your fingers with the written page. It's par for the course. This brings us back to that earlier assignment where we altered the note on the 6th scale degree in the Mozart piece. The original tune uses the major sixth, measured from C to A. But when we lowered the A to A flat, we created a minor sixth interval, which is a smaller sixth when measured up from the tonic pitch of the C major scale, the distance from C to A flat. Raising the lower tone of a minor interval by a chromatic semitone creates a diminished interval. Here we have a diminished third, diminished seventh, and diminished tenth. Hit the pause button again so you can practice playing this group of diminished intervals on your piano keyboard. To compare their sound with that of the minor intervals from which they are derived, merely return the bottom note back to its primary tone, C natural, and play again. Raising the lower tone of a perfect interval by a chromatic semitone also creates a diminished interval. Here we have a diminished fourth, diminished fifth, and diminished octave. Hit the pause button and practice playing this second group of diminished intervals on your piano keyboard. Compare their sound with that of the perfect intervals from which they are derived by returning the bottom note back to its primary tone, C natural. Finally, lowering the upper tone of a perfect interval by a chromatic semitone creates a diminished interval. We often encounter this inverse process when writing a series of chords, which creates yet another diminished fourth, diminished fifth, and diminished octave. When we study harmony, we will discuss chords in detail. For now, hit the pause button and practice playing this group of diminished intervals on your piano keyboard. Compare their sound with that of the perfect intervals from which they are derived by simply raising the upper note back to its primary tone. One more thing. When writing linear melodies, we occasionally encounter diminished primes, or diminished unisons. That is, in a melody. But not when writing chords, not in harmonic writing. Later on, we'll talk more about the subtle differences between harmonic intervals and melodic intervals. Great work! By now, we should have a better acquaintance with the building blocks, the intervals used in melody and in musical harmony. These 3 slides show a summary chart of the main intervals we combine together to build chords. The primes, seconds, thirds, fourths, fifths, sixths, sevenths, octaves, and ninths. Intervals are construction materials for writing melodies and musical harmony. The majority of chords, when dissected and analyzed, will be found to contain combinations of 2 or more intervals from the summary chart, stacked vertically. Furthermore, when we thread together or sing horizontally 2 or more intervals from the same chart, we create a melody. Your assignment is to transcribe all the intervals from the summary chart to music staff paper. Then, play each interval on the chart and say its name. For example, play and say perfect prime, augmented prime, major second, minor second, augmented second, major third, and so forth. Now, if you want to do the optional sight singing challenge for serious music students, play on your piano the lower note of each interval on the chart while singing the upper tone in chromatic solfege. Hint, there was a list of the chromatic solfege syllables presented in Part 3. Here's how to do this. For the perfect prime, play and hold the C on the piano and sing Do, which is the same tone as C in C major. Do. The prime is also the unison. The augmented prime is a chromatic semitone higher, so play Do again on the piano, but sing D, which is spelled D-I, for the C sharp. D. You may check the accuracy of your ear and singing pitch by comparison with the C sharp key on the piano. Continue in the same way, playing the lower tone, whether C or C sharp, and singing the upper tone in chromatic solfege of the remaining intervals listed on the summary chart. Well, that's all for this installment. Thank you very much for your attention.